Chapter 2. Now. Tony looked at his puffy, swollen face in the mirror. He hadn't looked anything like this when he first started this job. Back when he was leaner. He didn't sit so damn much. Didn't feel so soft. Tony would never consider himself police officer material. He was honest with himself about that. But sitting around all day at a bank, eating fried pastries and drinking coffee until his hands shook would probably eventually kill him. He was figuring as much. It's what happened to his dad. Tony finished washing his hands, completing his train of thoughts as he grabbed a few paper towels. Greg, the bank manager, didn't like Tony to use the private bathroom in the manager's office. Tony wondered if there were any custard-filled chocolate donuts left. When he walked out of Greg's bathroom, he saw that standing in the middle of the office was a slim, 30-something male of average height, which would have not been out of the ordinary, of course, were it not for the fact that this man was dressed as Santa Claus, minus the beard, holding what appeared to be an automatic assault rifle, and was bickering heatedly with the bank's manager, Greg. "Yes, you have an account with us, sir. I'm still going to have to ask."
"See, that wasn't so hard."
"Do you want me to open the other vaults? Emptying any other accounts?" The man in red said.
No, just mine."
The bank manager's face was that of sheer confusion. "If you're not going to rob us, and you have an account, then why break in here with firearms?"
"I thought it was Christmas."
Greg, still befuddled, corrected the man in red.
"Right, sorry."
Greg was flustered, his cheeks bright red. "Why would you?" The bank's manager couldn't comprehend or fathom the alien in red suit's behavior. "Why? Why, you have an account here. Why would you bring guns and shoot up the place?" The man in red was becoming impatient.
"Because I thought it was Christmas."
"No, it's Valentine's Day." The bank manager's voice had raised an octave.
"Yes, thank you. I know."
"Why the guns?"
"I may have gotten St. Valentine's Day Massacre confused with Christmas. This is Chicago, 1919, correct?"
the man in red asked, flustered. Greg's face dropped. He rubbed his eyes. The bank manager thought this surely must be some kind of mentally deficient practical joke, or the Almighty had just hated him. He looked up at the man in red, bewildered. "What? No. We're in San Francisco. It's 2019. The Time Lord in the Santa Claus suit stared up at the ceiling, perhaps pleading with a higher power of his own.
"I just want what's in my vault."
"Freeze!" Tony pointed his service revolver at the young Santa Claus. Just stop, Tony," Greg ordered.
"Put down that weapon, Santa,"
Tony yelled. "What the hell do you think you're doing in my bathroom?" Greg demanded. "I told you, damn it. You can't." The man in red dropped the machine gun on the linoleum floor. It landed with a loud, echoing impact. Then, the overly sensitive weapon fired off a round, shattering the window of the private bathroom behind Tony, the lazy security guard. Tony squeezed the trigger. Another loud gunshot. The fear-induced murmurs of the crowd outside the bank manager's office became a frenzied cacophony. The man in red was impacted squarely in the chest by the bullet. Orange blood spurted out in a spray. He fell backward a step. Bank manager Greg and security guard Tony watched the man in red's eyes suddenly explode in a pulsing crimson brilliance. Eerie, glowing scarlet illumination filled the room. They heard a clock somewhere in the distance. To them, it sounded somehow as if it were suddenly running backward. What the humans witnessed next appeared to them like a film being reversed. The Time Lord suddenly stepped forward, orange blood rushing to his chest. Then, being reabsorbed by the alien as the bullet extracted itself, sealing the wound behind it. The bullet hung, spinning and suspended in midair. The stranger's eyes continued to flare, bright red, until a moment later when the clock moved forward once more. This time, the man in red spun instantly as the bullet grazed by his chest. It charred the white tufts of fluff on his Santa outfit before it slammed harmlessly into a structure beam behind him, spitting dust into the air. Tony emptied his remaining 5 cartridges at the man in red. Greg shouted in the background angrily. The Time Lord had to move only slightly for every round that Tony fired. The alien's eyes flashed bright crimson for every high-pitched gunshot. Then his head would jerk away, or his shoulder, or his arm, or he would deftly slide to the right. The man in red had walked through bullets. The security guard completely emptied his weapon at the alien, succeeding in hitting nothing but exposed brick and structure beams of the manager's office. There was an unlucky computer or fax machine somewhere, and which suffered a casualty as well.
You won't understand what I'm talking about.
The man in red stood before the wide-eyed Tony.
When I tell you, my favorite perk of being a Time Lord, once in a while I get to play God mode.
The alien held out his hand. Tony swallowed hard and placed the spent gun into the man in red's palm. A young, very cute woman in an elf costume peeked her head into the office. Tony wondered what the hell was going on with the Christmas outfits. Fact is, for the rest of his days, Tony would never fully understand what was happening on this particular day, despite laziest efforts. Tony stared nervously at the sexy elf, while she asked the superhuman Santa Claus, "What did you do now? Did I or did I not say there'd be a security guard? Did you get yourself shot again? I told you to be cool."
Almost done in here.
The man in red flicked Tony's name badge.
You cool, Tony?
Tony watched the alien's glowing red hands wrench the barrel of his pistol backward, metal screeching noisily in protest, so that the barrel now faced the grip. The man in red handed the mutilated gun back to the security guard. Tony could think of nothing but screaming expletives. Terror struck him. Holy shit.
Sure,
Tony shrugged.
Yeah, I'm cool.
He attempted nonchalance. Crystal cool. He sweated profusely as he stared at his bent pistol. Inside his head, there were now even more shrieking curse words. Abruptly, the Time Lord walked to the other side of the office and stood in front of one of the private vaults.
Well, come on,
he shouted at Greg. All right, sweet Jesus. The bank manager joined him, placing his thumb on a biometric scanner. After another similar eye scan, the door opened. Moments later, Greg returned with a medium-sized safe deposit box. The man in red nodded, looking at it in anticipation. He smiled at Greg. The bank manager warily raised his eyebrows. The man in red smiled over at Tony. The security guard was trying to figure out how to reholster the warped, empty gun. The Time Lord rubbed his hands together, took a deep breath, then opened the box. He withdrew a scarlet wristwatch. All that nonsense. Greg furiously slammed the vault door shut. For a damned watch! Seemingly knowing this argument was about to take place, the Time Lord casually remarked,
Not just any watch, a temporal wrist device.
A watch, Tony stated.
No, a temporal wrist device.
The man in red corrected. That's what a watch is, right? Didn't I just say that? Tony sniped.
No, it's...
The Time Lord was exasperated.
You don't... No, it's not... See, it's a temporal wrist device.
Yes, a watch. Just call it a damn watch. Tony placed his hands on his hips.
It's not just a watch. It's also a temporal wrist device. I can...
Greg rubbed his temples. An insane man robbed me today, officer. Sorry to hear that, sir. What did he steal? From your multi-billion-dollar bank. Cash, jewels, bonds, traveler's checks. Well, no, officer. He broke into a vault which the staff would have freely opened for him, then forced me to open his access account, which he could have accessed himself, at gunpoint so that I would give him a watch. Specifically his watch, which he owns.
Merry Christmas!
The man in red smiled, appearing satisfied. Everyone and the entire bank seemed to shout,
It's Valentine's Day! 7 hells!
The stranger in crimson yelled. He pressed a button on his futuristic watch, which flooded the bank with an eye-shattering explosion of brilliant light. When it suddenly subsided, all was calm. All was right. Greg was startled by the bizarre weirdo standing in his office, dressed like Santa Claus. Can I help you?
No. You've been brilliant.
The man in red answered. He opened the door and left Greg's office. The manager tried to clear his head, remember what he was doing. He had a catastrophic migraine, and he couldn't explain why. Greg then noticed Tony, standing there, looking like an idiot, as usual. What do you think you're doing in here? The bank manager demanded from the security guard. Tony blinked his eyes, the last minutes having disappeared from his memory. He went to go check his weapon. Son of a bitch. He stared at the useless firearm. What in the I told you not to use my bathroom, Greg bellowed. What the hell? Did you shoot out the damn window? The man in red stopped listening to the pair bicker as he made his way across the crowded lobby. Confused, amnesic patrons rose from the floor, wondering how they'd found themselves here to begin with. And the Time Lord spun to face them all, overly dramatic, haughty, and slightly arrogant as he stood in front of the enormous main entrance. They were bemused at most.
Sorry,
the man in red announced, arms wide.
Mustache!
He flung himself through disappearing doors, slamming loudly behind him in his wake. Sully, while waiting outside, had torn away most of his elf costume and shook his head when the Time Lord emerged.
Mustache? Are you bloody serious?
The man in red deftly removed his excess outfit as well, revealing his perfect red zoot suit underneath.
That's what I heard the blue guys say. I remember saying it.
D3 approached, still wearing the low-cut, highly hemmed, sexy elf wardrobe. Why in God's name would you ever tell somebody mustache before you departed?
I don't have a clue. But I/E said it.
D3 tilted her head. Your what? Your previous self?
The man in blue, right.
The man in red came to rest, standing in front of the British phone booth. He glanced at Sully for confirmation. The retired Commodore lit a cigarette and grinned.
Mr. Blue said, must dash, you daft git.
The trio of time travelers entered into Purge's newest, crimson-hued incarnation. Inside, they were greeted by clapping. A figure sat in front of an antique mahogany-controlled console, lounging in a plush red chair. The stranger's voice bore a proper English accent.
Are you certain of that?
He spun around to face them. Mr. Blue grinned.
Let's have a parley, shall we?
The Time Lord in the cobalt suit snapped his fingers. Approaching sirens mingled with a choir of unnatural mechanical angels, and the time machine disappeared. Then, when he returned, the man in red found Sycamore Downs looking very different. The ghost train ride had collapsed into the bay. The old ships had disappeared, returning to their proper places in space and time. Now, the streets were filled with tourists and citizens, all enjoying a rare sunny day. Rye Monroe handed the stranger a scotch, straight.
Your partner sang the praises of these drinks quite often, and quite loudly the last time I was here.
Rye nodded absently. He looked away, glancing around the crowded bar, looking for Nicholas Baker. His friend and co-owner of Monroe's Tavern had just finished inventory and was heading behind the counter. Nicholas looked at the stranger's drink, his favorite. He pointed proudly.
That is 100-year-old scotch. Yeah, I know.
The man in red smiled politely. Nicholas glanced at him. There was something familiar. I know you, don't I? Rye announced.
Have fun with your mate. I'm a checking on the dishes.
He lit a cigarette as he wandered off. The stranger in the crimson zoot suit tilted his fedora.
Capes il decor vis traveler.
But that's... Nicholas shook his head. Not possible. It explains some things, but not all in my time with the unit have I ever met a...
Time Lord,
the man in red stated, matter-of-factly.
My name is not the easiest. Well, call me...
It was Nicholas's turn to interrupt. Traveller, I remember. You used to look blue. Different. So, now is there a pig traveller? The unfortunate Mr. Brown?
The alien shook his head. Not as of yet. But for what it's worth, God, I hope not.
Nicholas grinned, surveying his customers.
You and your friend have access to the deceit's avatars via psychic link.
The alien explained, again matter-of-factly. Come again. The man in red took a sip, made a strange face as he eyed his drink.
You and Rai, you're predominantly Nestine now. You've replaced the main consciousness. It rescinded because of shock. You never get sick. You can heal your own injuries. If you concentrate, you can change your very shape. Imitate others. Or more, you're bioplastic.
I am aware of that. Now, Roy isn't. So what does this have to do with?
It's all tied together, don't you see?
The Time Lord in the crimson suit counted off his fingers.
The rift is sealed. Deceit's avatar is trapped here for all eternity. Disguised as this stairway leading to your tavern's upper floors. For once, I can actually tell someone you get to live as long as you want to live.
Nicholas slowly placed both hands on his bar, leveling his gaze at the man in red. What exactly does that mean? The man in red stared back, surprised, as if this was common knowledge.
You can't leave this bar for more than 2 hours.
What happens if I do? The Time Lord looked up at his drink.
You and your buddy Rai was saved, yes, by the Nestine keeping you cohesive. It healed you, sort of, at a price. Instability will occur at a molecular level if you pass the threshold. You will fall apart. Rather, literally. However, if you stay here, near the avatars, constantly being renewed by temporal energy, your form will stay stable, whole.
A long silence. Then Nicholas Baker poured a shot of his favorite 100-year-old beverage, holding it up slightly for a toast. 2 hours, eh? Health and long life. Traveller held up his own shot.
Something neither of us have to worry about.
Rai Monroe watched the stranger in the scarlet suit exit back to Sycamore Downs. He made his way to his friend, Nicholas Baker, asking,
What's got that bloke on about?
Nicholas shrugged. Immortality.
Say what?
Nothing.
Right then. What did he want, you wanker?
Nicholas peered out the window. He wanted to borrow some Christmas outfits, left over from the mannequins at the fair, and he asked for directions to the oiler man. Said his lady companion had never been there. Rai shook his head.
Your mannequin's friends are so damn weird.
Nicholas smiled and took a sip, privately toasting to Traveller, wondering if they would ever meet again.